Okay, quick review. If you've seen my video, Pendulum Science, you'll see my method for testing these cones and the ORGONITE devices. But to give a quick review, the body, a healthy body, at least one where the ions are active, the ion fields will extend 6 inches beyond the hands, and so I can, with my left hand, reach out within 6 inches of something, and then hold this pendulum up with the other hand, and it will give me either a favorable or non-favorable reading, depending upon whether my body wants or does not want that product or object. What is happening is the macro signal, the ion signal, is coming through the body and down the arm, and it will spiral and cause the synapse to synchronize in either a clockwise or counterclockwise position. Because of this phenomenon, I'm able to, for my left hand, for example, I can put my hand on a child and use the right hand with a pendulum over products in the child's home, and I can actually start detecting for allergens, whether it's something they're eating or some of the products in the home, or the fabric softeners or the air fresheners, the carpeting, or even the shampoos used on the dog, or whether the child is high or low in vitamins and minerals. And just as a note, cheap vitamins oftentimes will not have any ion response because they're worthless. But what happens is the ion signal will transfer through the body, and when testing the fields on the cones and the pyramids, there's a collector field that radiates parallel to the base. This one here goes down about 3 feet and out a long ways. I went out 200 meters with it, and it was still going. And the distributor field that radiates out the top. Now, the collector field and the distributor field are different than the ion fields, because if I put my left hand on this into the collector field, I will get no ion response to it. It does not transfer through the body. To get the ion response to it, I actually have to put the pendulum itself into the field before it will start to move. There's a direct relationship between the fields that come off these things and the synapse. It does not go through the body like a regular ion signal. And it's good to know this, because then I can take on the top of this thing where the distributor field comes out, where it comes out the top of it, I get a very positive reading on it. But by using my other hand, I can set this into it, and I no longer get the reading off the distributor field. I actually get a reading off the content in the distributor field. That would be the minerals or metals, any material that it's picking up and sending into the ribbon that it's distributing. With my left hand, I can weed out the influence of the distributor field and actually get the ion reading of the content in that distributor field, whether it be the anions or whether it be the minerals that this is carrying with it. So this makes it easy to distinguish between a reading that I might be getting with the distributor field, or a reading that I might be getting with the content of the distributor field and what's inside of it. So I can actually, if I don't want to read the distributor field, I use my left hand and hold the pendulum out, and I will find out what's inside of it. And this is helpful too, because the major one of the major purposes for using these things is actually to be able to track that distributor field. It can actually be used for tracking purposes. And a person can then, you have 3 options. You can go and look for the distributor field itself by holding the pendulum into the field. But if a person is not responsive to that, some people have a hard time picking that field up, it's still okay, because you can put your opposite hand searching for the field, and you can actually pick up the anions that are being carried by the distributor field. Or you can place like salt underneath here, and then go looking for the salt that is actually distributing in the distributor field. So a person has 3 options then for tracking these things. One is to put the pendulum directly into the field to track the distributor field, and that's the method that I use. Or a person, if you cannot do that, you can go looking for the content of the field, because it will distribute it, it will carry it in a ribbon, and you can put out your hand and go looking for where those the anions and the minerals and other things might be in the air, so you can follow it that way. Another thing that I wanted to point out, just to reiterate, is that a cone or a pyramid, the dark energy, the stuff that collects and takes life out of you, takes the anions out of you, radiates parallel to the base of this. Now, a lot of people say, well, if you've got an orgonite device, that there is no negative energy involved with it. The orgon will transfer all negative energy into positive energy, but this is absolutely not the case. Because, first of all, this is orgonite. This is a composite material of metal and carbon, or high carbon content. The carbon in here is actually ground up royal oak charcoal, and it's put into resin and cast into a puck. This will produce the orgone, according to Wilhelm Reich and the others that have studied it. But what most people are doing is they're producing these beautiful, beautiful cones and pyramids, and they're putting in coils and crystals and calling that orgonite and saying there's orgone in there, and that's going to cancel out all negative energies. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a beautiful, technically there's no such thing as a beautiful orgonite device, because orgonite looks like this. It's dark, it's ugly, it's brown, it's black. There's no such thing as a pretty orgonite device. If it's clear, if you can see through it, if you can see the content in it, then there's probably very little orgone involved with it. So even the claim that it's going to get rid of all negative energies, first of all, you have to ask the question, is there any orgone in there at all? Well, people will say, well, oh, I threw a coil in there, or I threw a crystal in there, of course there's orgone in there. No. And this is not orgonite. This, they call it a tower buster, but there is no organic material in here. They got the metals in there, but the clear resin is not organic enough to have the effect with the orgone. So this is orgonite. This is where you get the orgone. And so if you want to have something that can even fight against any negative energies, it's got to be something ugly like this. It cannot be the pretty fancy stuff. But anyhow, even if you made a cone or a pyramid out of this pure material, there are still negative energies involved. First of all, let's forget I've already talked enough about the coils and about the cations that come out of these coils. But if you make orgonite, even if it's composite material like this, of carbon or charcoal and metal filings into resins, and put them into this shape, suddenly you have invoked all the powers and the forces and the physics of the OTTRS, OTTRS, the Organic Targeting and Tracking and Restoration System, which means that composite material, or no matter what it is, once you got the cone or the pyramid or something like this, you invoked all the forces that are involved here, and you got the collector field. Now the collector field will draw energy out of you. People say, well, this will cancel all negative energy. Well, not if you're losing it. This is actually like a black hole that's sucking anions out of you and sucking life energy out of you. And so just because you have something that you think is orgonite or orgone, put it on the floor. Keep yourself out of the field. And the other thing is that this thing will, because of the cone, because of the pyramid, you're looking at OTTRS, not orgonite. You're looking at OTTRS, not orgone, I should say. You're wrong way to say it. You may have orgone in there, but you got OTTRS also, and there you got the physics of OTTRS, which means there's a distributor field, and which means in that distributor field it's going to be targeting something. First of all, it's going to be targeting a genetic similarity, and secondly, it's going to be targeting a cation charge. That's its default programming. And if you get targeted by it, it will distribute into you the resins that are in this. So if you don't want resins in your body, then you need to do something about that. And one of the easiest ways, if you've got a beautiful device in your home, don't worry about that. Don't worry about the beautiful device in your home. Make yourself several cones like this, or cones like this of cement, and put them up along furniture, or put them along the wall. Put them so that they're facing in, so that they're on the wall. The reason for this is that they will be targeting anything that may develop a cation charge. If you have a cone and it's on a table and you're sleeping in the collector field, that thing's going to be sucking anions out of you all night long. But if you got cones along the wall or along the furniture, you know, just tuck it up behind a dresser. You know, it'll fit nicely between the dresser and the wall. It just fits right in there. This thing will look, and if you start losing anions, it will start replenishing you while you sleep. So if you have, and I recommend cement, cement, stone, or glass, because then you don't have to worry about the resins that we'll be distributing. But don't freak out if you've got a device that is a beautiful device. Don't freak out. I've already made mention about this, and a lot of people are panicking. I don't know what to do about my device. I don't know if it's good or not. Don't worry about it. Don't freak out. Just get yourself a bunch of these, put them along the wall, point them in. These things will target you, and if there's harm done by this, by sucking anions out of your body, these things will put the anions back into you. So don't freak out. But I just want to be clear about this, that even if this is made out of the composite material, there is actually harm that can be done, and you need to be aware of it. Don't freak out about it, because there's ways to deal with it. But the harm, one which I already put out in the Orgonite alert, is you don't want to be spraying yourself or the neighbors with cations, and you don't want to be in the collector field of this thing, and you don't want the distributor field to be putting resins into you. So those are the 3 alerts. But if you take cones like this and set them along the wall, or you know, above the dressers, so that they're pointing in, they will compensate for any cation charge. They will compensate for any loss of anions for pets or you, while you know, if you're in the collector field, and they will compensate for a cation charge that might make this thing target you. So just make yourself a bunch of cones and put them along the walls or on the floor, and you'll have them there for protection. And by the way, this is made out of a little thing like that. Just poured the cement in there, and the cement that I'm using is half Portland cement, half sand. Easy to make. This one here is actually a funnel with a marble in the bottom of it. Really easy to make. The most productive ones that I've made are actually this cup with these in there, because these replicate a stump, and I am researching the fact that they also replicate a woman's breast, and they also generate very, very, very well. But details, there is a world of difference between what right here, if you have a device like this, whether it's a pyramid or whether it's a cone, envision a glass right across here that goes on for long distance. There's a world of difference between what happens below that glass and what happens above it. Nothing that happens down here will transfer up here. This is a black hole that pulls energy into the center of this. And there's that glass. And when the domes form, the domes, which is the backup, because cations are coming out of here, anions are trying to come in here, that dome does not cross that glass. It stops right at the glass. And if you get a backup on this side, it domes to that glass. So there's a world of difference between this and this. And the distributor field, if it targets something, it can only target something that's above that glass. If you take that, whatever it is, and this is kind of a fun thing to do, you have it target something, and then you drop it down below that imaginary glass, the entire unit shuts down. You lift it up, and it actually takes about 5 seconds for this thing to get fully charged and become active again. You lift it up, it fires. Put it down, it stops. Lift it up, 5 seconds, it's fully firing and targeting. Put it down, it stops. It is like flipping a switch. You can actually run this thing, control this thing. But one of the mysteries is that when this thing is targeting something, like let's say it's targeting here, and you put this down below that imaginary glass, it will shut down, but it will not pick up a different target. It will sit there and watch this. There is a large force that governs and monitors all of these, and it's a guidance system. It is incredible how vast and how knowledgeable it is. It's definitely a different dimension, but that guidance system will keep this relationship between this being the the targeter, and this being the target's head. Even if the unit's shut down, it will monitor this relationship, and if this gets moved, suddenly that will fire itself back up again and target this thing. Very, very, very fascinating. Okay, let me talk to you about shapes for a second here. The OTTRS forms when there is either an organic carbon material like charcoal on the ground. It will pick up the anion charge of the earth and will start to generate on its own. You get a puck like this, it will not generate OTTRS on its own, but if you put it by something that's generating an anion charge like this side of the coil, or by a battery, or placing this down into the dirt, it will start to generate then, and OTTRS will form. If you take a glass of water like this, it is tapered enough where it will self-generate on its own. The collector field, though, will form on the top. Distributor field will come out the bottom. You can actually get OTTRS to develop off something this simple, because OTTRS is ubiquitous. It's everywhere, and animals use it a lot in nature. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But as far as shapes are concerned, this shape here, because it's shaped like a diamond, will actually pick up EMF. It'll produce anions out the bottom, cations out the top. As we discussed before, the cations will cause a traffic jam of the anions trying to come in, so the efficiency of a cone or a pyramid is actually decreased by the intensity of the EMF signals. But if you go to a thing like this, which looks like a root of a tree, a stump, this does not reflect the EMF. And by the way, if you have curiosity, these markings on here, I had these taped together with electrical tape to cancel them out, because I was having computer problems with my truck and I thought there might be a relationship, so I canceled them out by putting them butt to butt here and then taped them up. That's what these markings are for. Let me get one here. It does not have those markings, so anybody's curious about it. But this shape here does not pick up the EMF. It does not produce the cation charge out here. It does not produce the EMF anion charge out of there. Therefore, this is more productive than that. Plus, this is the shape, the functional shape of the OTTRS, because this one here, it will start to fire, and oftentimes it will, at this point, will start to dissipate inside of here, and it will actually start targeting out the side. So a lot of this extra material is not necessary. So this is my favorite shape, very easy to make using this cup here, and very, very productive. I do not have the problems with the backup. Now let me talk about the targeting system of these things. Because I'm able to track these using the pendulum, I can track the distributor field and where it's going. Has some really entertaining revelations and discoveries with these things. I had a cone sitting on the table of my house, and let me get something here so it's situated halfway decent. There we go. So this cone was sitting on the table of my house, and I was testing out, looking at the collector fields that are on it, and checking out the distributor fields that were on it. One morning I got up and I went out to the kitchen, and I was standing by the refrigerator, and I was tracking the field, and the field was coming right towards me. I assume maybe because of stress or something, my cations had built up a little bit and it was targeting me. But about a minute before I came out, my wife commented that her back was hurting. So as I'm standing there monitoring this field, she walks past me over to the sink, and this field left me and curved and hit her in the back. It actually turned and was hitting her in the back, and it's like, oh, look at that. Was one of those times where I started laughing like a lunatic. Here it left me and started hitting her, and I tracked it right to the center of her back where the pain was. It picked up the cation charge that was in her and started distributing anions into it to try to heal her up. So this has medical purposes and targeting purposes. And this thing is really, really fascinating, because to talk about parts of this thing, the collector field is down here. So if I want to distribute something, I put it right here. I put this right on top of iron or salt if I want to send iron or salt to somebody. The targeting system on it, the target match, is established right here at the top of this thing, or at the top of the cone. And what I did in order to test this was I told my wife, I said, you know, if you have any dirty laundry that you're going to be throwing out or that I can use, let me know. So she gave me a pair of socks, dirty socks that she was going to throw out. So I put them on top of here, and this thing, because it picked up the genetics of her sweat and stuff in those socks, picked her up as a target match and would target her no matter where she went. Well, she went into town one day, and I thought, oh, this will be interesting. So she drove. It was 1 mile that way and 5 miles that way that she had driven, and I set this in the inside the house, and I was tracking it, and it was going out the window. It was still tracking her 5 miles away. It was still sending anions toward her because of the target match from her dirty socks. I thought, this is really fascinating, that I can actually track her whereabouts from five miles away using this device. Well, I'm sitting here and I am tracking her, and she'd been gone, maybe about an hour, and I'm still watching, once in a while checking, and the field is still going out this direction, in the direction of where she was at. She was to the north of me by about 5 miles, and this was going north. And so I'm thinking, this is really, really fascinating. Next thing I know, the garage door opens up. She's home. And this thing is still pointing north. I said, what in the world? She had come 5 miles back this way, 1 mile back this way, and this thing was still shooting north. I thought, this is strange. What in the world? So I stayed in the room where I was at, monitoring this thing, and I'm yelling back and forth to her, you know, conversing with her. And it took 10 minutes for this thing for the field to start forming around and then back to where she was at. 10 minutes it was out there. It was almost like it laid out a cord that was over, it had followed her to where she was at, and when she came back this way, the tip of it had followed her. The tip of it was on her, but the rest of this was still strung out, and it took it 10 minutes to wrap it all up and to get a direct shot back at her again. So I'm coming to realize that this thing has a time issue with it. You know, if there's movement and stuff, it takes it a while to figure out where something is at, and has a hard time tracking a moving object. Excuse me. But the fact that it takes about 5 seconds for it to fire up, and the fact that it took it about 10 minutes to retract the field that was out there and to get a direct shot to her again, made me realize that there is a time lapse on this thing. And then another thing that was fascinating was, and I got to tell you that after we had that issue where she had commented her back hurt, and then when she went past me and this thing left me and targeted her, I wondered if there was a relationship between this thing targeting her and the fact that she had declared that her back was hurting, where there was actually it just raised a question in my head. Okay, so another day I'm here in my truck, and I am 750 miles away from my wife. I've got the dirty socks on here. Now, just to make a layout, my truck, I had just parked it. I'm pointing this direction. Now, according to my GPS, my wife is at the 4 o'clock position. She's out this way from me, 750 miles out this way at the 4 o'clock. So I set the dirty socks on here, and I checked it, and this thing was firing to the 6 o'clock. I thought, what in the world? And I followed the spray, and here the spray was going up straight back into the sleeper of my truck where I had charcoal. And because the cone I was using, I wasn't using this one, I was using one that was made out of resin and metal and charcoal. It was targeting the charcoal in my sleeper as a target match instead of the dirty socks that were on it as a target match, probably because the charcoal was only 3 feet away and my wife was 750 miles away. So anyhow, this is targeting the charcoal, and I don't know if I said it out loud or in my mind, but I said to myself, or out loud, I said, hey, you're supposed to be looking for my wife. No sooner had I said it than this thing abandoned the charcoal and fired off to the 2 o'clock position. And I thought, 2 o'clock? My wife is at 4 o'clock, but it stood there at 2 o'clock position. And I measured it, and it was about, waited on it, it was about 10 seconds. And then it started forming, and it moved back to the 4 o'clock position. I remembered from the other test that it took it 10 minutes to get its bearings. Well, here it took it about 10-15 seconds to get the bearings from she's not at 2 o'clock, she's at 4 o'clock. And it targeted her then, eventually it targeted her from 750 miles away. It was pointing to her off of a pair of dirty socks. So you can see the possibility of using this for target matching and long distance tracking. Let's say that you have a child who's lost in the woods. You can take child's clothing, like a dirty sock, like a diaper, like something that they sweat on, a blankie or something, or a pillow that has their DNA on it, hold it over this and set it on the ground, and this thing will, from a long distance, find out where that child is. Now, you might have an issue where it might be pointing back to the house, where there might be a lot of the child's DNA. In that case, you can actually tip this away from the house, and what it will do is it will put the house into the collector field. Remember the imaginary glass that goes out the base of these things. It will not target anything in or below that base. So you can actually lift this up so it's not targeting the house anymore, and then it will go looking for a genetic match somewhere else. And so something like this can actually be used for targeting and finding people, lost children, or somebody that's even in the military and missing in action, or POW. This can be used. A dirty pair of socks, a toothbrush, some hair out of their comb, a bunch of things like that can be used for targeting people at long distances. Also, I discovered, for targeting purposes, that the hand, if you look at the shape of this, nothing too spectacular about it, it's basically a point, but the hand, being an organic material, having this point to it, will generate the field off the tip of it. The collector field forms off the fingers like this, but if you point the hand either that way or this way, it will go looking for a genetic match. And so you can actually, let's say that you are the mother or the father of the child. You yourself are a genetic match or a similarity, because that child is yours. You can actually take one hand and put it out like this. Actually, if you tuck it in by your side, you'll get the distance with it. And if you want, you can put some of the clothing from the child in your hand, and then you can hold the pendulum out here and track where that pendulum is tracking the field. The field will actually radiate out from your fingers, and we'll start looking for a genetic match. So you can see why studying this thing, oftentimes I'm thinking, man, I'm losing this. This is impossible. 750 miles away and I'm tracking somebody. So the possibilities of using this for good and harm are pretty astounding if a person wants to develop it. But this brings up the next issue. Remember, I said that there were two default programs. Default meaning if there's no other influence on them, this will go looking for a genetic similarity, a target match, or it will go looking for a cation charge. And as I discovered in my truck, this thing is also influenced more than anything else. It's influenced by the mind. When I said, when this was pointing at 6 o'clock, I said, hey, you're supposed to be looking for my wife. It immediately abandoned the charcoal and went looking for the genetic similarity to the socks. It went looking for my wife and found her 750 miles away. This made me curious. So I took 2 pieces of charcoal. And remember that there was a charcoal cone that I was using for this. And so it was targeting one. And I asked it, I said, would you please target the other one? And the field moved to the other piece of charcoal. I said, would you please target the first one? And it moved back to the other piece of charcoal. And I thought, this is really strange. And then I had some other things on my sleeper. I had several other objects. One was my hat. And I said, would you hit my hat? And it left the charcoal and hit my hat. And I thought, this is and no matter what I asked it to hit, it would hit it. And I thought, this is crazy. This thing is being controlled by my request. Okay, here's another thing where you're starting to think, am I losing it? Do I really see this? Or am I just going crazy? And then I started testing whether it was verbal or mental. So instead of asking it, first I asked it, and then I tried by ordering it, and it would respond if I ordered it. And then I thought, well, let's not say anything. Let's just think it. So I thought, hit the other charcoal, and it hit the other charcoal. I thought, hit that one, and it hit that one. It was responding to my thoughts. And I didn't have to ask it. I didn't have to command it. I was just saying, hit the charcoal. Well, I guess that is a command. But it was responding to my thoughts. And the default program is genetic similarity and cation charge. But if you use your mind to direct the thing, it will abandon the default program to hit what you need to hit. And so because of this, I've mentioned before that I keep myself ion neutral. One of the ways that I do this is I have cones on the floor around me at all times, and I have told them, I said, hit me. So if I am in any way get a cation charge building up, this thing will activate and will hit me. So this is really fascinating. It can be controlled by the mind. Of course, that brings up a ton of more questions. So I actually used a cone because it would sit flatter better. I took a cone and I made, let's see if I have them here. And I bent up twistums. Let's see if I've got the other one. Talk about being ill-prepared. I don't see it here for now. What I originally did was I had two twistums. I bent one for a Y and one for a no, and I started asking this thing questions because I wanted to find out if it was intelligent. And eventually I just abandoned the twistums and I went to paper clips and established the fact that this one is yes and this one is no. And I started asking this thing questions, and it was answering my questions, yes and no questions. I thought, okay, we're really opening a can of worms now. And I was told by some of my Christian friends this must be demonic. And I thought, no, I'm not convinced about that being demonic yet. Because I remember even in the scriptures they used the unum and thunum for casting lots and figuring out, answers from God. And so I thought, well, let's see what this thing does. And so I was asking it questions, and I just grilled it. I just kept going through question, and I would be driving down the road and I'd think of a question to ask it, and so I'd stop at a rest area and then ask it the question. I just put it through a myriad of tests, but the field would change as far as a yes or a no was concerned. And it almost acted as if I was talking to somebody else. And this went on for several weeks as I was testing this thing, and I finally got to where I said, you know what, I'm not convinced here at all, because I was getting some frustrating and contradictory answers to some of my questions. So I asked my wife particularly, give me a question that I don't know anything about, because I am dubious about the origins of this. And so she said, well, I just went shopping and I bought a coat. She said, ask it if the coat was beige. Now, if this thing was directed by God, God would know what she bought. And if it was directed by the devil would know what she bought. I remember back from when I was young, Flip Wilson had his famous line from Geraldine, that female that he would impersonate. And she would always say, "The devil made me buy the dress." And I kind of believe that the devil is oftentimes tempting and influencing women in a lot of their shopping. So I assumed that God would know what color the dress was, the devil would know what color the dress was. But I asked the cone if the color was beige, and it didn't answer. Now, it has done this before when I asked it a question that was like dumb. It would just sit there and not answer me at all. And it did not answer. And so I reasoned with it. I mean, what else am I going to do? I said, look, I need to find out whether you're from God or whether you're from the devil or what you are. So I need you to at least take a shot at it, to answer me yes or no. Was the coat beige? And it answered yes, the coat was beige. I asked my wife, was the coat beige? She says, no, it was black. And so I started to realize that the cone was running off of my database, that the cone was tapping into something subconscious inside of me. The answers I was getting, I was not getting them from somewhere else. I was getting them from somewhere deep down inside of myself, which is really, really fascinating, because I thought, what part of me is this? What part of me is this? And it just put that question on the shelf as far as what was directing this. And thinking about, okay, there's something primordial, something instinctive, something subconscious inside of me that was causing this thing to change its targeting and direction, that was causing this thing to answer it. And I had no way of knowing how to proceed on it until I was studying the different shapes and how they appear in nature itself, because these things are ubiquitous. Take, for example, I tested my cat, and this field was forming off the nose of my cat and was going out. I tested this off my wife's breast. There was actually a field generating off of her breast. Predatory animals often have pointed noses. Now, I still have to test to see if this works underwater, because water has a different effect to specifically say if there is a pyramid or a cone. The collector field forms, if you set it on sand or bury it in sand, it forms at the base of this, not at the level of the sand. But if you set it in water, the collector field forms at the level of the water. So I still have to do underwater testing with this to see how this affects animals like sharks. But a friend of mine was telling me about a study that he heard somebody that was monitoring wolves in the Yukon. And this pack of wolves, one day the alpha female let out a howl and took off running through the woods, and the pack followed her, and she ran for 3 days and came upon a pack of muskox, and the pack attacked a herd of muskox, excuse me, and the pack attacked the babies of the muskox. Now, she was far enough away where there probably was no smell that she could pick up from them, but from the nose of a animal comes the otters. There's the nose, and there's a field that comes out of the nose and heads out toward targeting. Remember, the default is, number one, it's going to look for a genetic match or similarity. So if an animal is able to track that field, he can detect from a long distance away where a genetic equivalency is. Even for mating, he can find a mate using this even over large areas. Secondly, it's going to be looking for a cation charge. Now remember, a cation charge develops in something that is wounded. So if this is a predatory animal, and if he can detect the otters that's coming out, the distributor field that's coming out, and the reason that they can detect this is otters itself, remember, it picks up minerals, it picks up whatever's at the base here and sends it out in the field. So if this is the nose of a predatory animal, there is actually stuff in the blood of the animal that is going to end up in this field. And by the way, I tested from the target backwards, it does not work. Nothing from the target comes this way. I was curious if the smell would be found, but it does not go this way. It always goes out that way. But if the blood of the predatory animal particles are sent out in the distributor field, and if the guidance system picks up a cation charge from a wounded animal, the field will change. And if this animal is picking up, okay, my pack is over here, my pack is over here, I know they're over here, it's picking this up, and suddenly the field shifts and goes off into this direction. If it's a sudden change, then either something suddenly appeared that's a genetic match, which is pretty unlikely, or there's a cation charge out here, which means there's a wounded animal. There's something wounded, which means this is easy prey. Now, if the blood of the predatory animal is in the spray, he can smell this then in the air. And because it has a slow movement, as I talked about, that 10 minutes to retract, this stuff is in the air, and he can actually follow that scent to the injured animal. And this would explain why that with the birth of the muskox, the wolf could probably pick up the cation charge from the mother or from the delivery itself, or in the basic instinct of an animal. There might be enough subconscious or cognitive, I don't know how an animal thinks, but there might be enough in the brain of an animal to affect the charge, to affect the guidance system. I was able, using a cone, to give it basic commands, and it would tap into my subconscious and give me answers. If it can tap into the subconscious, if there is a subconscious to an animal, the very instinct of the animal could guide where that field is. The animal, a predatory animal, could get a hankering for muskox, and the guidance system would find it muskox, even if that was 1,000 miles away. Because I still have to do the underwater testing, I am not sure of this, but people talk about how sharks can detect chum and other things in the water from a long distance, and they thought about maybe the smell. But it could be too that when there is chum in the water, that there's actually, from the slicing of it, there's a cation charge, and the shark swimming along, monitoring where the other sharks are, suddenly picks up this change of signal. It goes swimming off there to figure out what in the world this sudden change was, and then it gets close enough where it can actually smell it. A fish, for example, when it gets the instinct for spawning, it's possible that the instinct of a fish is strong enough to affect the guidance system, and the guidance system from thousands of miles away will put that smell into the water as to where its spawning bed is, because a fish, when it spawns in a river, the minerals from that river are in the bones of that fish, because it was developed as a guppy in that fish. The minerals specifically for that river are in the bones of the fish. So when it looks for a genetic equivalent, the genetic equivalent to the bones of that fish are up that river. And so a genetic equivalent, if it's spawning time, would direct that fish, and I still have to double check this for the underwater testing, could direct that fish from thousands of miles away back to its spawning beds. So this is really fascinating. But one of the things that I find here is, because this is active in animals, and it could also be working with birds for how their migration, the system for guiding birds using the migratory system. You think of animals that know how to follow the charge, that know how to follow this. I think about humans. You know, there is absolutely no reason that a woman whose child is lost in the woods cannot incorporate this into finding that child. And there are questions as to the intensity of the instinctive reaction of the animal or the person. If a mother puts out her hand like this, there's going to be a genetic equivalent field that's going to go out, and if she orders that field, find my son, that will strengthen the direction that this thing is going to go. And it's possible that the closer and stronger instinctive drive that the person who is directing the field, the stronger the instinct, the more accurate and long distance this thing is going to travel. So it's possible, if you've got a missing child, you can take a cone like this or a cone like this, put something of a genetic match on it, and then have it might improve it if you have the mother either hold the object or tell her to command this with her mind or her words, command this thing with all the instinct of a mother bear, command this thing to find the son, to find the missing person. And then a person can just track the the charge to see where in the world this thing is going. Okay, so we've discussed the possibility of using these things for tracking. And tracking persons or objects persons or substances has unlimited possibilities in the military and law enforcement, and you can use your imagination as to how that would apply. But the possibilities and the opportunities for such development are so vast that I'm just going to this is one of the reasons I'm showing my methods and my findings, is so that other people can pick up and go where I cannot go. I can't follow all the possibilities of applying this technology to this discovery. If there's a child that's lost, I actually volunteered my services to a family who had a child that was missing, and I volunteered the services, and before I could actually go trying it out to see how well it would work, his body was found in the woods. And so I never got an opportunity. A friend of mine said, well, hey, if you haven't developed this yet, it might not work. And I said, yeah, the worst thing that could happen is I could look like a fool. The best thing that could happen is we could find the child. And so if I have to weigh the possibility of possibly finding a child or possibly looking like an idiot, I'd take the chance of looking like an idiot if we could find the child. So this is one of the things that I'm developing personally, is finding missing persons. If you have an interest in military affairs or want to develop it so you can be a contractor with the military for finding IED material, weapons caches, persons of interest, the list goes on and on and on. Or for the military, thinking of border patrol, or finding drugs, or finding missing persons or persons of interest, or high value targets. Or even if you have a case, if you want to be contracting with law enforcement, a woman gets raped and somebody leaves DNA behind, that DNA can provide a target match. All a person needs to do for developing any of these is to cleanse the body so that the ion fields are active, so that you can use a pendulum, and then develop using the proper target match for what you're after, and the proper cognitive command to make the thing go after what you're going for. It has to be something the person has to develop, but the possibilities and the potential is there for developing it into a service and into a talent that can actually be contracted out or developed for the military or for the law enforcement. The other thing that I am using this for and testing it out is for, and I want to mention here real quick, shapes. I'm going for the most powerful shape, which so far is this. When you're doing the tracking, it does not appear that the shape is so critical, because a person can even use their hand for the tracking, because all you need to do is you need to be able to send a signal out. You need to be able to track the field about 10 feet. And how this works with tracking is a thing called triangulation. Okay, let's say that you're looking for a child that's lost in the woods. If you hold your hand out here and you've got something of the child's clothing in your hands, you find out where the field is going. And let's say it's going out that way. Well, you get out a map and you draw a line in the map as far as where it's going, but you don't head that way. You head that way because you're going to try to triangulate coordinates. So you head that way, depending upon how, you go that way for a while, and then you do the same thing. And then you check to see where the line is and draw it on the map, because you're going to get a line here, you're going to get a line here. Eventually they're going to meet. That's where you want to head. If you just start heading down this line here, you don't know how far to go. But if you triangulate here and you take the two lines and find out where they intersect, that's where you head to get your next bearing, to figure out what's going on. So this is how you do the tracking, whether you're looking for persons or whether you're looking for substances. But the possibility of tracking, it goes on to even things like prospecting. People run around all the time with metal detectors. Well, why not just take a gold ring in your hand? And or put it on your finger and hold it out and find out where this field is going. Where is it finding a genetic or a match, a target match for that ring? It's quite likely with the right target match and the right cognitive prompting that you may be able to find buried treasure with it. It's something that a person needs to look into. But the other thing that I'm looking for is to use this in medical purposes. Okay, so for tracking, you don't need a high output unit. You can even use your hand, track at 10 feet just to get your direction and then do your coordinates. But for medical purposes, I want to try to get the most powerful unit I can, and the reason being is when it does the targeting, it usually will leave only one device will hit the target. This and this will not pick on the same target. Once one hits it, the other one will leave it alone. But let's say, for example, a friend of mine just recently died of cancer. He was just swollen up inside, cancer all over his body. Cancer will develop a cation charge. Cancer is also pH sensitive. It does not like alkalinity. Researchers say that if you have get your body up to a pH of 7.4, cancer cannot grow in your body. And if you have problems with cancer, you bump your pH up to an 8, and all cancer will die out of your body. It is pH sensitive. But let's say that this is my friend who's dying of cancer. He's got it all over in his body. And it also has a cation charge to it. I can take some of his clothing, a pair of dirty socks or something, and this will then target into him an anion charge that tends to alkalinize. Plus, I can take a strong alkaline substance such as sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, put it in a plastic bag, put it under this, and try to get the most powerful cone that I can, and with his genetic match on it. And what's going to happen is this thing is going to target him. It's going to target wherever in his body has the strongest cation charge, and it's going to carry the potassium hydroxide, which has a pH of about 13. It's going to carry the potassium hydroxide into the tumor, into the place that is hurting, where it's needing it. So not only for fighting cancer does a person have to do like the Gerson therapy and flush with fresh alkaline fruits and vegetables, freshly ground, so you get the anion charge and the enzymes and the alkalinity from them. Also the coffee enemas that they do, that's a really good method for curing cancer, but also to inject, because they found they can actually cure cancer with baking soda. Just by injecting pharmaceutical grade baking soda into a tumor, you can kill it. Well, what about if you injected it with lye, sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, and use this to do it, because the particles of the sodium hydroxide will go into wherever the cation charge is. So I am testing this to see what is the possibilities for it. This is a cone that I have set up for my wife. She has a habit with her health problems to be low in iron, and so what you see in there is iron powder that is from a local car parts store where they turn rotors, and they throw this stuff away by the buckets. She also tends to be low in chromium, and so I took 2 tablets of chromium and broke them and put them inside there. And you see those bars, that is actually small thin plates of zinc, and those are also in there. And because they're at the base, the ions and atoms of those minerals and metals are actually driven up through this. And then I take this, and this is simply a handkerchief that I had her wipe all over herself to get her DNA on it. And it's up the upper part of the cone that the target match is made. And so the collector fields will collect anions in the bottom. They will also collect in the metals, radiate them out the top, and with the handkerchief on here, it picks up her DNA and targets her with the metals. I originally had set this downstairs, and we had slid it under a desk that had a drawer in it for a file, like a filing cabinet drawer, and it was under it. And I wanted to double check to see if the iron was actually being radiated from it, and I opened up the file cabinet drawer and ion tested the files, and where this had been spraying up into the filing cabinet, that paper, you couldn't see it, but you could detect it with the ion indicators, had iron in it. And when it was moved away, the paper that was not in the ribbon that was coming out of here, that did not have it in it. So that way I knew for sure that this was actually transferring the metals down the anion row, or the anion field that it was sending. So now I have moved this actually into the bedroom, stuffed it in a corner, and I could put a shirt of hers, preferably something that's been used and hasn't been washed yet, still has her DNA on it. We can cover that with it. And then this thing will, as she sleeps, will send iron, zinc, and chromium into her. So we are actually using this cone for medical purposes. The next thing I want to discuss here is the possibility that the Great Pyramid of Giza, I've seen reports on it that it was actually, people speculate that it was an electrical device, that it had more functionality than it did anything ceremonial. And by looking at it and by studying the forces and fields that we have been talking about, the OTTRS, this structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza would be OTTRS' wet dream. I mean, the thing is so large and so powerful. The fields that would develop in there would be incredibly strong. And as I was looking at this, trying to apply the how the effects of OTTRS work, this thing looks like it could have been designed specifically for incorporating the forces of OTTRS. Because remember, at OTTRS, the collector field forms the bottom. Well, underneath the pyramid, the collector field will form at the base of the pyramid. There is a subterranean chamber down here. So not only would this thing collect anions, and not only would it collect moist anions from the sand and from the water, because there was a causeway, a water causeway heading to the pyramid. So this could actually suck up the anions and suck up the moisture from the causeway and distribute it to wherever they wanted. But they could also put whatever they wanted into this chamber here, and it would get distributed in the field. I mean, if they wanted to put sulfur in here and aim this thing at the lighthouse in Alexandria, that sulfur would end up on that lighthouse, and possibly could be the reason that that thing burned day and night without ever going out. Somebody would just have to keep supplying this with the sulfur, and it's possible that whatever they wanted to supply here, because of the hazards of actually descending into this chamber, because the negative forces that are going to be there drawing life out of things, that they could actually just pour a water-based solution down into here, and it would be sucked up and distributed. Because there are harmful energies in a pyramid. There are people who have taken tours of pyramids and gotten very, very ill in certain parts of the pyramid, and it could be because OTTRS, depending upon where they were going, they could have stepped into the fields that is present. The collector field could have been sucking anions out of them, or they might have gotten further into it where the anions are traveling so fast it could actually cause a disorientation and a lot of other health effects. But if we superimpose a cone like this, and this is actually the shape that OTTRS prefers and tries to induce into any shape, this is what it looks for, and this is how it acts. You can see what we would get here. Here would be the collector field, that it would suck stuff up. In here would be the anions would be coming up through here, and the force of the anions going through here might cause chemical reactions to where they could actually cause other things to affect, because I believe that this was a multi-energy system that they were using here. Some people thought it might be acoustics. Some people thought it might be electrons. I think it's a combination of many, many different forces that are happening here, and it could all be fueled by the OTTRS, the collector field coming in, and it's consolidating right here, so you've got a strong anion field going through here. And this is the thing here that was really fascinating to me. One thing that they note about the this pyramid is it's not like a burial chamber. There is no paintings on the walls. There is no paintings. It looks like it was utilitarian. And I was thinking, the fascinating thing about it, paints would cause a target match. It is possible the reason they did not put painting in this thing was this was actually incorporating the OTTRS fields. Now, on a cone, the target match is established in this area here. How fascinating it is that they have this chamber, this hallway that goes here, and my angle's a little bit off. It's a little less steep than this, but there's no painting on it, but they said that there are recesses in the walls here. And this is the area where the target match would be established with the OTTRS forces. And there was also what they call the sarcophagus up here, but the thing is not shaped like a sarcophagus. It's not the right shape. And I was just speculating, if this was used for the target match along here, that sarcophagus might not ever have held a dead king. That may have held the contents for the targeting. It's possible with the material that they made it of, that once they put the lid on it, it was no longer influential as a target match. It's possible that either in a tight consolidation or the stone that is around it, that eliminated it as the possibility. So whoever was driving this thing, whoever was coordinating this thing, whatever they put down here that they wanted to send, they would take a target match out of that sarcophagus and line it up in the niches that were down this hallway here, and that would give it a target match. And whatever was here, along with the anions, whatever they put in here, along with whatever they were doing in here, because whatever chemical reactions were occurring in here would also be taken up in the anion targeting device and distributed it to its target. Remember, this is a singular distribution system. But you could take, let's say that the Egyptian soldiers were going off to march into combat. There are a lot of people who sell anion devices that you put on to give you strength. Well, if every one of those soldiers, before they left, spit into a jar, and that jar was placed in here, so that they went out marching and they took the jar and just set it in here, in this area, it would pick that up as a target match, and that corporate genetic match of those soldiers, it would then start sending the moisture from the Nile River. It would be sending whatever was in here, and it's very, very fascinating that when this was first discovered, they found about 1.5 to 2 inches of salt in here. So it is possible either the Nile flooded and got the salt in there, or they placed the salt in there, possibly to be sending electrolytes to the soldiers. So what would happen then, if they were targeting their soldiers, they could send moisture to them, they could send electrolytes to them, they could send whatever they were having a chemical reaction into here with them, and these things and the anions would also be distributed to them to give them extra energy for the march. This could also be used for ships at sea. You may be having problems with scurvy. Well, let's put something with vitamin C on there, and let's take out of this box something that is a genetic equivalent to something on that ship. It's possible that they may have sent the ships out with a box of genetic equivalents. It could be jewels, it could be stones, it could be some genetic targeting thing that they would set out here, and so they would place down here what they wanted to send to them, place out here the target match, and this thing would distribute it then to them. It's also interesting that this is a pyramid complex, and part of the reason that's fascinating here is because when you are running this thing there, you don't want to be in here when this thing is running, because the anions and the collector fields, the distributor fields, are so powerful they can harm you. But if you have somebody and you've got other pyramids nearby, you can have somebody direct this pyramid to hit this one. When this pyramid is directed to hit this one will shut down. The workers can then go in, they can change the target match, they can change whatever they want to change here. If they've been doing electroplating or something else in here, they can change this out. And then once they're done doing all their manual work in here, somebody can trigger this just by thinking it, or using a cognitive influence, or there may be a target match system in there. They can have this target something else as soon as this. I'm going to put a pyramid behind here so you know what I'm pointing at. I see this in my mind. Let's just put one back in here. Okay, as soon as this pyramid quits targeting this pyramid, this one will fire back up again. It will pick up the new target match. It will send the new materials or whatever this is here, and all this stuff will be going to the target wherever it sends it. One of these pyramids might be dedicated to the Lighthouse of Alexandria. One of these pyramids might be dedicated simply to turning this thing on and off so the workers can come in and replenish this whole thing. But it was very, very fascinating to look at this cone over this shape and to see, yes, there's the collector field. There's whatever it would be sucking out of it. Here's where you would get the anion fields going in and possibly electroplating or chemical reactions. It might actually act like a microwave in there, depending upon how much is occurring. And here is where you would have the sarcophagus, which would actually be a chamber for the genetic matches that would be lined up in the niches down this hallway here, where the genetic matches would be picked up and this thing would do its targeting. Now, this just looks like this was what it was set up for, but of course we also will incorporate other possibilities of other energies, especially when we look at the compression chambers that is over the king's chamber here, and some of the ventilation systems here that could be incorporated in their religious beliefs about the Orion belt and the different constellations. So this could be a mixture of religious beliefs and functionality as a powerhouse. And there also comes the possibility, and this is just remote, but it's something to I thought about and laughed about and said I wouldn't doubt that this is also a possibility. The power of the Egyptian empire waned about the time that the Israelites were set free from captivity and went wandering around in the desert for 40 years. And also that the Egyptian army had a little bit of a spill into the Red Sea. That was about when the Egyptians started losing their power. These cones and pyramids, remember, they're first looking for a genetic match, which could be established here. Next, they're looking for a cation charge. But they can be superseded by the power of the mind. Now, in quantum physics, they talk about all things are sustained by a very, very high frequency, which John Worrell Keeley, back at the turn of the century, described as the power of thought, and it's described as the divine matrix. People thinking that it's the mind of God, that when God said let there be light, that it wasn't something that he said, it was something that he thought, and by the power of his thinking created the frequencies to which the particles and all atoms and everything became that. So there's this divine matrix, the thought of God that holds everything into its shape. Well, that very thought of God being that strong, let's say the Israelites across the Red Sea, they've gone out into the desert. They're wandering around for 40 years. That mind that is creating the divine matrix, what if it said to those pyramids that over those Israelites there would be a cloud by day and a fire by night? To all the pyramids on the pyramid plateau, the Giza plateau, fire by day, or cloud by day, fire by night, and that this thing, being driven by the mind of God, would be sucking up the Nile River and sending it into the atmosphere above the Israelis, causing a cloud to form above them, which would actually be from the Nile River. itself. And then at nighttime, when they didn't need the cloud, these things would be firing. And all of them together, firing the anions into them, would create what looked like a fire, a flame, an anion flame. And there's a possibility, too, that there may be chemical reactions of all these things coming into that area. But imagine if you're the mighty Egyptian empire and you lose your slaves, and then for 40 years somebody hijacks your pyramids. And the power and efficiency of them. No longer does the lighthouse of Alexandria light up. Everything for 40 years, somebody hijacks this thing. Imagine that would do to your prestige, losing your slaves, losing a bunch of your soldiers, and losing the power of your pyramids. I wouldn't put it past God to do that. That just seems like a fast way to bring down a kingdom, is when you hijack their technology and the thing that gives them so much power. But anyhow, a lot of stuff to think about here, and thank you for listening.